Welcome to Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. I'm Lori Falk, and together with my three powerhouse co-hosts and a slew of thought leaders and luminaries, we're bringing you a scintillating talk show style podcast that will disrupt the worlds of wealth and wellness as we know them today. We invite you to go on this journey with us as we offer you a paradigm shift that empowers you to change your approach to these key areas of your life. Join us and discover the truth that the future of wealth and wellness begins with you.
Hello and welcome back to another amazing episode, of course, always amazing, with Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. Today, you have three of us, three out of our four. One of our co-hosts is in the process of a move, which, can be very trying and very mentally unhinged at times, going through all of the motions. So we wish you well, Lori Falk, and we look forward to having you back really quickly, and good luck with the move.
But Jenny, that is a little bit amusing because I'm moving this month as well. We both are moving in Mental Health Month. I mean, what were we thinking?
Right? Well, June is apparently a really good time to start new chapters. So,
We'll clean up stuff in May.
Yeah. We wanted to continue with, Mental Health Awareness Month, but we're going to take a little bit of a turn. And we are so fortunate to have Leslie Thomas with us as one of our amazing co-hosts. She is the Money Confidence coach, and you can check her out in her Money Confidence Academy. Of course, we've got all of that information in the show notes and on our sites as well. But we wanted to delve into something that Leslie has brought to our attention, which is a really powerful tool that I think gets often overlooked, and especially for women can be really challenging, especially around finances. So we're going to talk today about boundaries. And, getting right into it, especially Leslie, since you brought this topic to us and you have some amazing points to talk about, I'm just going to turn it right over to you, and let's give the audience what they came here for.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Boundaries. Why is such a small word so difficult for so many of us, and in particular women? And given it is Mental Health Awareness Month, it's really important, I think, to understand the effect our mental health can have as a result of what is going on with us financially. And what I see in a lot of people that I speak to is the impact of our sense of self-worth and self-value in saying no. And no is a complete sentence. There is nothing that has to be justified when you feel the need to use the word no when it comes to money. But because we are programmed as women to want to be helpful, to nurture, to want to ensure that we give people what they ask of us, then very often we struggle with putting effective boundaries in place when it comes to money. And part of the problem with that is because we haven't been brought up very often with the ability to put effective boundaries in place. So things like when we were younger, going off to the coffee shop for the first time, after school, and us asking, our friends, what do you want to have to drink? A Coke, an orange juice, or whatever. And your friend says to you, I'll have a Coke. And then you think to yourself, hang on, I bought you a Coke last week. Oh, it's okay. It's only a Coke. It's only a couple of dollars. I'm not going to worry about it. But if that pattern keeps repeating, where you don't want to make a fuss about it, you don't want to speak to your friend and act like you are not particularly generous, you don't want them thinking, oh my God, it's only a couple of dollars, what are you going on about? That is that first step where you hold back from saying how you really feel, and it's the first step towards it having an impact on your bank account. Because if you're going to keep bankrolling the orange juices, the Cokes, etc., then it's going to start getting very, very expensive. So I think we all need, and we've all had these experiences. I know I did when I was younger. Did you ladies have that experience where you struggled to say no to somebody because it was only a couple of bucks, a couple of pounds, as we'd say in the UK, and you let it roll because you felt it was uncomfortable to say, hang on, I bought the round. I did that last week.
Oh gosh, Leslie, I'm feeling a sense of yucky when you brought that up. Um, I, yes, I'm sure. I'm somebody that likes to be generous, and probably many of us are like that. And we've probably been taken advantage of by people who don't have that sensibility. And I got that sense of yuck when you said it, of like, oh, that's like the first nail in the coffin. Like that's the first little thing that chips away, that we might not be aware of at the time. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I can remember, and it's a really silly little thing, a client, sorry, coming to me a few years ago and saying, and again, Jenny, this might be something that you can speak to, saying, I'm in a WhatsApp group, parents' WhatsApp group, and we've agreed we're going to buy those swim caps, that you buy when you go swimming, basically, when the children go swimming. Yes, back in those days, we had to wear swim caps. And she had agreed to buy the whole group, their children, a swim cap because she was able to get, they were on sale, she was able to get a discount, something like that. And she said, all the parents have paid, bar three. And it's not a huge amount of money, but I feel really uncomfortable asking for that money. But if I don't ask for the money, then it's kind of setting a precedent that it's okay not to pay for what you rightfully should pay for. And I said to my client at the time, well, how's it making you feel? Well, it's making me feel really cross. And what happens if you don't address that? I'm just going to get more cross. And what happens if there's a situation where, again, you are able to provide a product discount, and yet you haven't addressed it? She said, I don't think I'll be able to do that. So who's going to lose out in that instance? Well, in that instance, probably the children, but also everybody else in the group as well. So what do you need to do? I need to address it. So that realization. Now, do you have similar things going on as a parent where you are experiencing things being taken for granted in terms of, it's okay, it's only a couple of pounds, a couple of dollars, she'll pay for it?
Leslie, I I am very involved in my children's lives, especially at school. The last couple of years, I was the room parent for both classrooms, both my son and my daughter, which is a lot, especially in elementary school. It's a lot to help with, all the activities, with the parents, kind of coordinating these days, and yeah, monies for, gifts and all of this. I mean, the school is constantly asking the parents for donations and contributions and all of these things. And so, yeah, I absolutely have dealt with that and seen that through the parent chats. And it is frustrating when you give and give and give, and it seems to be the same few parents that are offering support in that way. And, I know what it is to struggle financially and that. So I'm not going to bring that up. It's exactly what you're just saying. I mean, I was taught, and I think most women is that kind of selflessness is means that you are giving and you don't set those boundaries because that is love. Like we in return receive love for being selfless. right? And so I think that gets misconstrued. And so actually, because of a lot of the things that I'm going through this year, I refuse to be the room parent this year. It was a little bit expected, but I chose not to be. And now I'm seeing it from, from the other foot. So yeah, it's difficult.
Well,
And
Leslie,
that's exactly it. Sorry, Susan, carry on.
no, you.
I say, and that's why it's really important right from the beginning to set out what your expectations are and therefore what your boundaries are. And I think for a lot of people, whilst it can be uncomfortable to say, yes, I will go and buy, but your share of that is X, and can I have it in advance, please? Or can I have it when I hand over whatever it is to you? And I think very often people don't necessarily mean to not pay. It's just they have other priorities. And sometimes it is just a case of reminding somebody, this is what I'm doing for you. This is how much it is. Can you please pay me now? And this is how to facilitate that payment. And I think when we are quite clear about our boundaries, we automatically feel a whole lot lighter about having these conversations because people already know what's expected of them. And it's when people don't know what is expected, when they don't know the rules of the game for engaging with you, then sometimes your values and their values become misaligned. So there has to be an understanding of this is how I do things, and this is how I do things for you. And when you have that clear understanding, people are more accepting of your boundaries. What were you going to say, Susan?
I was going to say, and I'm impressed because you took us in a direction that's wasn't where I was expecting to go, and I really like it. And when you were speaking a moment ago, one of the things that came up to me as a good, and I hadn't thought this through before, so I'm grateful to be having this conversation in, that theoretical conversation with those other parents. That sales technique where you don't ask the person, do you want an appointment or not? You ask them, do you want it on Tuesday or Wednesday? You give them a different choice. What
Yeah.
was coming up for me about that as an empowered way to handle that conversation is, this is what I'm doing. Do you want to pay me by Zelle or by PayPal? Or, like have the choices be assumed you're going to pay
Yeah.
for this. This is how I'm doing it. And and I wouldn't have, I don't know that I would have thought of that before. So I'm appreciating this. And if there's more to say about it, I'm certainly open. But where I thought you were going to go, and I think we should, we started out with kind of examples of women having these poor boundaries potentially with each other.
Yeah.
The more of the elephant in the room, I think, is the boundaries that we need to have with the men in our lives.
Yeah.
Where there's,
Absolutely.
I thought that's where we were going to go. And I'm glad we
Yeah.
took this detour because this was also meaningful. And I hadn't been thinking about that, of how universal this opportunity is. But, I'm obviously want to hear what you have to say, but I know I grew up in a family where my mother didn't have good boundaries with my father, and he was the one that said what is. So I grew up in a world, most of us did, where women just didn't have boundaries around money with their partners.
Mhm.
You might be surprised to hear or not that I grew up in a family that absolutely had really good boundaries, in as much as my mum, they had a joint account, but my mum was the one that had the savings account. So my mum, right from a young age, brought me up realizing, not because there was any, not because there was any malice behind it, any planning to exit, the relationship with my dad or anything like that. They've been married now very happily for 60 odd years, but because my mum was very independent and she wanted to have her own money. So I just saw that as absolutely normal. But for lots of women, it's exactly as you've said, Susan. And I think that is the thing about boundaries and money. and boundaries in general, because actually how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you don't put boundaries in place in terms of money, then you are very, very unlikely to be putting boundaries in place in terms of anything. You're going to be walked over in every aspect of your life, is the experience that I have. And I think for women, we can, for all sorts of reasons, defer to the man. And part of that deferring to the man, oh, my husband looks after the money, that's a very dangerous position to put yourself in. If your relationship splits up, if your partner dies, if they're run over and go to hospital and you can't access the money, you've got bigger problems to deal with than just what's going on in front of you. And I think sometimes we do it because as women, some women like to think money is complicated, and therefore it's a task I can hand to somebody else, rather than actually going, no, this is something I want to know about. I want to have full access to. I want to have my own account, as well as putting into a family joint account as well. Because I think it's important as a couple to come to an arrangement that you are both happy with. It might be two separate accounts and a joint account that you both put into each month, or it might be purely a joint account you have full access to. It comes down to the couple to decide what is right for them. I mean, I know, Jill, I can see you're wanting to jump in there. I am sure you have something to say on this.
I want to bring up a couple of points because, something that you just said, Leslie, and I really want to highlight this for our audience because, I've often talked about our future generations. I know Leslie has children as well, and I think this is really important to take note of, is that, I'm more with Susan, and, the finances were dealt with by my father, and it wasn't, we didn't know what our finances were. It wasn't talked about. Money throughout my entire extended family seems to be a little bit of a taboo conversation. And Leslie, what you just expressed about, how more independent your mom was in relative to keeping the accounts and that kind of thing. And I want to just point out where you're at. You are the money confidence coach.
Yeah.
Right? You're successful. And so this, and of course there's lots of stories and it's not, but I just want the audience to recognize, how important it is for our children to be aware and to have these discussions with our children. And I was talking to this, to you, Susan, just the other day, and I brought this up and I said, I think, an aspect of people who are wealthy is they talk about money and they talk
Yes.
about their finances. And those who aren't, it is more of a taboo. They don't want to talk about it because it feels, embarrassing. It's stigmatized. It's not as seeming appropriate. So I think this is really important for going forward for our future generations. And as well as, as women, because we are talking about a little bit more of the mental health aspects of this as well. Money it's an energy exchange, right? And we've talked about this before. So you're protecting, and these boundaries we're talking about, you're protecting your energy, which ultimately is your greatest currency, right? And so as far as like the frequency world goes, your energy is everything. So when you don't have those boundaries, especially around a really prominent energy such as currency, current energy, current, right? Then we can become extremely drained and feel scattered, and we don't have clarity, especially if you're giving away this power to someone else. So, I think financial stress is often less about the lack of money, but more about the lack of clarity and agreements, as what you're just talking about, Leslie, is, being very clear with what you want, who takes care of what, and what that means. Even if you're starting out in a relationship, and of course, typically, if you're working the same job as a man, and we've dealt with this, before, but men often make more than women. And so a lot of people get hung up on, oh, well, you need to put 50-50 in, and we need to go Dutch for dinner and all these things. Think about it maybe in more of a percentage. This is just me throwing this out there, but I had a conversation with a girlfriend about this, about, maybe starting out, you each put 20% in to the house fund or whatever it is, so there's a lot of ways that you can kind of gain that power. But I wanted to bring that up because I think it's important, for our mental clarity, but for future generations to be having this conversation.
Absolutely. And I think, we are the example by which the future generation, will grow up, the examples that they will have. But what we are demonstrating in putting effective boundaries in place is self-respect. And I think for a lot of women, when they are not clear on their boundaries, when they allow their boundaries to be exceeded, it's demonstrating to themselves a lack of respect, and that knocks on to their own sense of self-worth and self-confidence. And once you start on that spiral, that is when it really does affect your mental health, because those conversations you're having with yourself are not respectful conversations. And if we are not cheerleading ourselves in terms of both our own relationship with money, but how we actually do money, then we know that ends up with us feeling really bad about ourselves, questioning our own sense of self-value. And then that feeds into other aspects of our life as well. And I think what you were saying, Susan, in terms of, relationships, if we are not respectful of the most important relationship we will ever have, which is with ourselves, exactly, then that is going to play out into the relationship that we have with a romantic partner, with our friends, with our colleagues, etc., etc. And that is when, I firmly believe, by establishing boundaries, you are saying to everybody, I trust myself. I trust myself. I have self-respect. And for me, this is where my boundary is. This is where I stop. This is where I say no, no, no. And that is the end of the discussion. And I think for all of us, we feel that energy when we actually get to the point where we've had enough. But actually, we shouldn't get to that point. It should happen before we've had enough. You were going to say, Susan?
Leslie, I was feeling that when you were saying it, and coming back to what Jenny was bringing in, that money, is really essentially just energy, especially these days. It's just computer entries, really. It's not something you hold in your hand
Exactly.
anymore. It's purely energy. And I could actually feel when you were speaking kind of the flow and the ease that is possible when you're clear with yourself about boundaries versus not. And one of the things that I was reminded of, and this is triggering me personally, but I'm guessing that there are other women that are going to relate to it, is the resentment that we can experience when we're tolerating things that we don't want to be tolerating, and the energy and flow that shuts down. And I'm even going to cop to the passive aggressive behavior that I have occasionally observed in myself as a response to that, which doesn't serve me. And I'm not bragging about it. I'm being vulnerable here. I can see how this cannot work. And actually, I'm a little bit grateful, given where I am in my life at the moment, to have this awareness to be bringing into all of the things I'm creating right now, because this feels like a critical foundation. And I can see that while I would say I have very good boundaries in some ways, and those of you who know me might observe that, um, this is an area where I'm actually having a lot of illumination by this conversation. And I'm excited about the prospect of utilizing the good boundaries that I know how to have in other areas and extending them here. And so I'm going to offer that opportunity to anybody listening. This could be a real wake up for a lot of us in a very subtle way that can change things very powerfully.
And that's exactly it, I think. It only takes subtle shifts to make a massive difference. Because I think we can probably all think of a difficult situation, we've got coming up in the near future where we potentially have to put a firm boundary in place. We have to say no to something. We have to pick somebody up on something. And of course, that can make you feel nervous about what's going to happen. And a little way to deal with that, a little kind of exercise, is to simply practice that conversation. Because in practicing how that conversation is going to go, how you are going to have that conversation, where you're going to have it, when you're going to have it, and how you're going to start it off. Because if you start the conversation off, you start off in control. And when you start in control, you're unlikely to be misfooted. That's not the word. Misfooted is a completely made-up word. I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. I've had a long day today. But by practicing what you're going to say, actually, again, that shifts your energy. It puts you into a position of being in control of yourself, being in control of your nervous system. And actually, very often, when you anticipate how something is going to go, when it's a difficult conversation, you usually anticipate it's going to be far harder than it's actually going to be when you take charge of how you are going to manage that situation.
Leslie, I had an experience of this actually on the other side very recently, where I had to make a request and it was not comfortable. That's the other side of this.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
wasn't very comfortable,
Yeah.
but it was something that was needed, and it was something that I was clear I was going to get, and somebody was going to be very happy to say yes to me. I knew that. I just didn't know who. It's like that you have to kiss a bunch of frogs first,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I did do that rehearsal. I shared this with Jenny actually. And I got to a point of being so neutral in the request in my mind of saying to, whoever, look, this is what I need. I know somebody's going to be happy to say yes. I don't know if it's you. So I'm just asking. So no pressure. If it's not for the highest good and easy and joyful, it's not you, but I'm just ticking off my list. And I was actually able to do that in a way that I think respected other people's boundaries, which is another aspect of this, which allowed me to comfortably make that request. And yes, several people have said, I wish I could and I can't. And somebody said, yes, I'm the one.
Yeah.
But it put me in a place of ease that at the beginning of the process was hard for me to imagine. And I really feel that that place of ease allowed that positive outcome in a way if I had been stuck. So this was a very recent experience, so I thought that was worth sharing. And I was feeling that if somebody approached me that way, I would feel really good about being able to give a sincere response and being able to say, well, I can't do this, but I could do that. And how
Yeah.
else could I support you? And have you thought of this? So that there would be that fluidity and flow rather than just a no. So anyway, that sparked that for
But
me.
I think that's really useful to share, because that kind of leads me on to, another thought, because they say, don't they, that you are the sum total of the 5 people you spend most of
Mhm.
your time with.
Which is why I'm so glad to be with you, ladies.
Absolutely, absolutely. But if you surround yourself with people who have very clear boundaries, then the conversations you're going to have with them are going to be a lot clearer. So you're either going to learn how to be more effective in your boundaries, in your boundary setting, but you're also not going to find yourself in a situation where people are taking advantage of you. So it's taking that whole thing of being really mindful. So if you're in a group of friends who there's regularly, one person who doesn't pay, their round, at the bar, or doesn't get a birthday present when everybody else, buys you a birthday present, but you always buy them a birthday present, then actually start thinking to yourself, is that the person I want to be spending time with? Because sure as eggs are eggs, the person that does you wrong when it comes to your boundaries, they will be the person that occupies far more of your mental time and impact on your mental health than those people who are actually supporting you and have the same values as you and you can rely on. So I think actually becoming really aware of, where am I giving away my power? Where am I giving away my energy? And in doing so, I'm giving away my self-respect. And think of yourself in that way, as though you're literally physically giving away a part of you, a precious part of you, to somebody who doesn't deserve it.
Leslie, you just reminded me of something else that I think really needs to be said here, and it kind of follows on from the 5 people point that you made. But we've talked here many times, because it is a universal truth, about sympathetic resonance. And we attract the energies that we hold. So, one of the other beautiful reasons to be cultivating good boundaries is that we will attract people in our world who also have good boundaries. And when you think about who you want to be collaborating with and spending your time and living your life, that's what you want. So there's an ultimate thing about, be the person that you would want to have in your life. And there's probably no better example of that than this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And in doing so, be very unapologetic, because I think very often our women's use of the word no is followed by sorry, no, sorry. Doesn't need to be sorry, it just needs to be no. And I think the more we can almost practice that word no, the easier it becomes. And I think because of the effect money can have on our mental health, and the amount of energy that we can waste when somebody is disrespectful to us in terms of money, then we have to do all that we can to protect not just our finances, but the energy around that and the self-respect that's connected to the energy around that. And I think the more that we can think about the situations that we have been in, which we haven't handled as well as we wish we had of, with hindsight, and if we think about the situations that are coming up, and then work out a strategy for ourselves going forward. In this situation, this is the person I want to be. If this situation happens again, this is how I'm going to deal with it this time. Because the last thing we want to do is to look back retrospectively on what happened years ago, weeks ago, months ago. Yes, learn from it, but utilize that to actually bring you forward in a way that you are happy with, in a way that gives you peace, and that you would be happy to replicate over and over again.
Leslie, I shared something off camera. I'm sorry, Jenny. I I really just do want to make this point because it's feeling very raw for me. And I sense that this could be a very valuable message for somebody else. But in terms of what you were just speaking about and looking back at the past of, choices we made and, things that we wished we'd handled differently. I think I can speak for a lot of us and say that, many of us have gone through financial challenges and made choices from a space of not feeling secure and stable and cared for, and perhaps allowed things to slip that we ideally wouldn't. It might not have been a deliberate thing to stick you with the Coke that day, but maybe, didn't have the couple bucks in my pocket kind of thing.
Yeah.
And what I realized recently, and this was a big breakthrough, so I'm just going to share that here before we wrap up. Because everything is frequency, I realized that what I didn't understand at that time was that the message that I was sending out vibrationally is I can't afford to do the right thing here.
Mm.
And that message, that vibration probably did more to hold that situation in place than anything else that was and was not going on in my life. And it was a huge realization that I'm really grateful for. So I would just offer that, and this is the lesson, for me at least, that if there is a situation like that ever occurs again, and I hope, of course, that I'll never be in that situation again, but I would like to think that I would be the person that would take you aside and say, Leslie, sorry, things are a little tight this week, but I look forward to making it up to you. And I just want to acknowledge your generosity in treating me today. And that would have been enough, I think, between us for the energy to stay clear and for me to let the universe know I'm deserving of being able to pay next time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So this was raw for me, but I wanted to share it.
Focus on you next time, or maybe wine.
It's a deal. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. I just want to offer a couple of things for our audience because, we talk about boundaries and setting boundaries, and it is a practice. It needs to become part of your practice in order for you to really get this benefit from it, right? And really start acting out of integrity in a lot of different ways. And that will extend beyond just finances as well. And I want to say that we, touched on a lot of things, but we can go deeper, and we do go deeper. And to please join us in our groups on Facebook and ask questions and, be present with yourself. And if you do have some issues or struggles understanding what it is that you might not be setting as far as boundaries, we've got Leslie. She's a resource, please utilize her. Please come. Susan and I also do a study group around this, where we talk about the book, The Having, and we really kind of try and break through some of these boundaries around this as well. But, join us because we're going in a little bit deeper than just this podcast. And, I just want to offer a final thought because I think, boundaries can be thought of as your love kind of in action and towards yourself and others. And it's not something that limits you. We often think boundaries have to be this structural thing that just keep us closed in. And I don't think that it's that way at all. And that's definitely not what we're discussing here. We're talking about boundaries in more of a liberating sense to be able to create and receive and sustain wealth from being more grounded and having a regulated nervous system enabling you to go forth in the world and create whatever it is that you want. So, again, thank you, Leslie, so much. And Susan, of course, and we wish you well, and we'll see you in June on another episode of Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed, where we empower women to take control of the two most important areas of their life, their health and their wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another amazing woman who's ready to elevate her wealth and wellness journey. Stay connected with us by heading to our website and joining our Facebook community. All the details can be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep thriving and unleashing your highest potential.